concerned about coming here tonight because I'm stealing your captain that everybody loves dearly. In fact, I have to say that so much of the feedback I received from people in this room about Captain Wilski and his performance over here really helped inform my decision in selecting some of my assistant chiefs. So I want to say thank you very much, Steve. I know it's bad news for some of you that he's leaving, but the good news is that he's going to control all uniformed personnel in the city. So I assume you're going to get your share of resources over here, and I know he already told me he has a soft spot in his heart for all of you over here, and so he's not really going to go anywhere. And he also assured me that he's going to spend as much time in the community as possible. And I've asked, in interviewing people for these jobs, that was one of the top, there were several criteria, but that was at the top of the list. People who are really going to get out there and engage with the community and establish those relationships that are so important. So congratulations to him, it's very well deserved. I'll tell you another brief story. So when I first arrived back in the summer, I said, every neighborhood of the city deserves its own policing plan. We shouldn't just have one big community policing plan for the city because each neighborhood is unique. So let's develop a micro plan for each little neighborhood in the city. So we decided to do that. And I went and I informed the captains that that's what I wanted to do. Well, about 2 weeks later, several of the captains were coming to me saying, you want us to do what? And at the same time, Captain Wilski walked through the door with his binder. He'd already defined the geographic boundaries of all his neighborhoods. He'd already established relationships with, a lot of he talked to a lot of the block watch captains and others. So, that too, there's just been a number of signs all along the way that have helped to inform my decision. So there were we ended up promoting 2 insiders and 2 outsiders today. In fact, I think another member of the team, Bob Murner, is here. Bobby, will you stand up? People are going to say that Bob is awesome. Bob is one of these postseason free agents that I just picked up from Boston. So we're. Some will say, oh, gee, he must have been her pal from Boston. Unfortunately, Bobby and I never worked together closely. We were never in the same unit or the same precinct, out there, the same district. But I did have the privilege of promoting him to lieutenant when I was commissioner back in Boston, probably about 10 years ago, right, Bobby? And then he continued to rise through the ranks there, and he's been the chief of detectives there for the last few years and has done an extraordinary job. 4-time Medal of Honor winner. I said, when there are issues going out out in the field, he'll be the first one on the scene. But he also recognizes the importance of prevention and intervention. He worked a lot in Boston with young people in the community, trying to focus on diversion programs, prevention, intervention programs, and did some wonderful work there with multidisciplinary teams. So we're delighted to have him on the team. Also, we're bringing in another guy who's been working recently on gang issues in Yakima, but he is a career police officer from Tucson, Arizona. Terry Parent has a national reputation. He's just a phenomenal human being and also a great police officer. Leslie Cordner, who's a career Seattle police officer, was also elevated today. And of course, we have Deputy Chief Carmen Best, who I appointed to that position several months ago, and she'll remain in that position. So anyway, thank you very much. It's been a busy day. It's been a hectic day, but we wanted to get back here and resume this meeting and talk to everybody and actually answer some of the questions that are on your mind. And let's talk about the priorities here in your neighborhoods. I think that I'm going to rely on Captain Wilski to help me out a little bit. I know we've made progress in some areas since we last talked, but we certainly still have challenges ahead. So, Steve, do you want to say anything? You want to give a little update at this point? Last time we were talking about the robberies. We were concerned about the robberies, and I know there have been some arrests made. Maybe you can give a little brief, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Really, we've had 2 different series of robberies. The first were the robberies that were targeting the kids, taking their cell phones when they were on their way to school. Oh, I'm sorry. So used to that. I try to stay away from my phone as much.
Get used to it.
series. We talked a little bit about that. The last one of those we had was February 4th. We haven't had any since. We actually made an arrest on the last one that was on the 4th, and we haven't had any since. So I believe that the arrest and some vehicles that we ended up taking actually ended that series. Unfortunately, we had another series that had started up, and it's been very prevalent around Westwood Village. We put a lot of resources there. We had, in a very short period of time, we had probably 5 or 6 of them in about a week's period in time. All young kids. We ended up arresting 6 kids yesterday. What we ended up doing, they were a mixture of adults and juveniles. In some cases, they're responsible for a couple of different robberies. What we've tried to do is, obviously, we have to take enforcement action. They did actually a pretty violent robbery, but we've also reached out for some of these kids to the Seattle Youth Violence Project, and we're getting them hooked up with counseling to try to get them kind of back onto the right road. But we've identified those folks. We're working with the King County Sheriffs, with the Metro Transit Police. We're getting our bike team as quickly as I can. We're going to have a full-time bike team that'll actually split their time between Westwood Village and South Park. So we're trying to do what we can. That bike team's going to be delayed probably about another 10 days. But we have identified the kids. We are getting them hooked up with counseling to the greatest degree we can to try to get them off the path that they're doing, because they're going down a pretty self-destructive path. And we're getting a mobile precinct, and like I said, the bike officers out as soon as they can. So.
Okay, so the first person that signed up is Bruce Brewer, and then he'll be followed by Travis Burgesson.
Thank you all for being here tonight. And congratulations on your new position, our loss, but you make it right, I know. Just what I was wondering is, I've grown up in this city, have seen the officers wear the French blue blouse, and our cop cars being the French blue or French blue and white. I am at a loss as to how changing a visual image is going to help improve morale, productivity, taking care of the issues that we're having within the city, and against alleged issues we have against some of our police and tactics that we have here. Question 1. Number 2, as I was driving here, I heard an interview done with the gentleman you hired from Amazon. I'm not feeling real overconfident. He quote unquote states, I have no experience in police, zero, nada. And he says, I know the systems are lousy, but I'm paraphrasing that one. So what I'm seeing is a lot of money being spent on the visual side of things, expenses being pushed off on our officers, the stipends they're given for the new uniforms, I don't think it's going to cover it. I've got a lot of friends in the department. And how much money is this new computer system going to cost us? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those thoughtful questions. I appreciate the opportunity of being able to address those. So first of all, in terms of the cars and the uniforms, the decision to change the color of the cars had already happened before I arrived. And I think a lot of it had to do with cost, because it's a lot easier to buy a plain navy blue car than it is to get the special paint job done on the other ones. And also the Ford had stopped manufacturing the Crown Victorias, and a decision was made to go with the new SUVs. So those decisions were, and I'm not passing it off, but I was told that the decision was made based primarily on affordability, and also when those cars do go out of police service and they're going to be resold, apparently it's easier to resell them by taking off the decals, and the navy blue color apparently is better for resale. So also shortly after I arrived, I was approached by members of the union who said, we've been talking for 10 years about changing the uniform, what can you do for us? And I said, well, have we done a survey yet? And they said, yes, in fact, we've done a survey, and well over 70% of the officers want a change of uniform. They like tradition. I mean, we all, appreciate tradition, but they said that the uniforms were wool, they were uncomfortable, that most jurisdictions have abandoned them so that they're very unique. And because they're unique, they were more costly. They were about $20 a shirt more than the uniforms that we have now, which are standard, available off-the-shelf type of uniforms. The officers had also in the survey indicated they actually went out and did wear testing of the uniforms prior to my arrival, and the officers picked out the shirt and the pants, the material that they wanted, which is a poly wool blend. It's lighter and it also is washable. So they're more affordable and they're washable. This hasn't cost the city any money out of its operating budget because the officers are under their contract are entitled to a $550 a year uniform allowance, and they agreed to put that uniform allowance toward new uniforms. We determined that to get a full set of uniforms, it would cost $850 per officer, so that left a gap of $300. So we went to the city and asked if we could have permission to spend forfeiture money that is allowed for a variety of police purposes, and it was determined that we could give each officer $300 out of the forfeiture money, not out of the regular city budget, in order to cover the balance for the uniforms. So, bottom line is it's something they wanted, they came to me about. We helped expedite the process. We made sure that they selected the uniform they wanted, and we made sure that it wasn't that it didn't cost us any more money out of our budget. So that's the uniforms and the cars. Let's see, what was question number 2 now? Oh, the computer system, thank you, yeah, thank you. So when I arrived, we actually had a police officer overseeing technology in the Seattle Police Department. And people come up through the ranks, and I'll say this about myself too, we work hard to be good cops and good detectives, but not a lot of us have the opportunity to learn a lot about technology or HR or finance or, all the important management issues associated with running a big organization. So, we have close to 2,000 personnel and an operating budget of hundreds of millions of dollars. We need to be responsible about the way we manage it. So I said we need to get a professional HR director, which we did, and I said we need to get some professional technology people in, and that's what we're doing. Now, we do have people on board that have been working in mid-level tech positions who've been working on police technology issues, and they're very good, and they understand the police business. But we put out the advertisement for the CIO position, the Chief Information Officer position, and again, we didn't create a new position. We used existing money to do this. But we put out the ad, and we got over 220 applications, and some phenomenal people. Some of them had some police experience, and a lot of them didn't. And when we interviewed this guy, I was particularly impressed because the first thing he talked about is how he could go out into the field with officers and figure out a way to make their jobs more efficient, to help them put technologies in their hands that would help them do their jobs better, but also make their lives easier. So they didn't have to spend inordinate amounts of time in the police station filling out reports. They could stay out in the field where they belong, on the beat, and do a lot of their work through handheld devices. So I liked the fact that he thought outside the box, that he wasn't wedded to, an old way of doing business. Because unfortunately, we all know, if we come up through the ranks of a certain business, certain profession, we've only known one way of doing it. And I thought it was kind of cool to get somebody in who's had a vast amount of technology experience, somebody who will think outside the box, look at our business processes, look at the way we do our business, and help us figure out how we can do that business more efficiently. So I actually joked with him and said, I think it's an advantage. We have people who understand the police business who are working with him on technology projects, but I think it's an advantage to have a big thinker. I mean, the person who's responsible right now, if the Amazon website goes down right now, he's responsible for it. Well, I'll be happy to think that my technology is in the hands of somebody who's had that kind of responsibility. I think it was a huge score. I said, he's obviously made a decision of the heart, not of the head. He is taking an extremely substantial pay cut to do this, to make a commitment to public service. But he said that, he thought it was a very unique opportunity and it's something he wants to do. At first, he told us he wasn't going to do it. He declined the offer. And then 6 days later, his wife told him that he'd been pouting for 6 days. He seemed miserable, that, she thought maybe he should be given. So I would just say, let's give him a chance. If it doesn't work out, he can certainly go back to Amazon or any place else. But I think it's a really interesting opportunity. I think it's great to get people from outside of policing, outside of the insular police environment, to come in with new and fresh ideas. So that's why we hired him. But thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's important that people know the story behind it.
Travis? Yeah, just come up to the microphone if you would, please. And then Richard Hurley will be next.
Yes, there's a couple of interconnected questions that all come around. Basically, kind of interested in an update about where things stand right now with the investigation into Officer Cynthia Whitlatch.
Oh, yeah.
Whitlatch. And the thing that I'm most concerned about is, to me, I think that whole episode, I confess I'm relying on what I read in the papers, but a lot of stuff has come clear over time that this was someone who was, maybe troubled, at very least had an attitude that needed some work. In a lot of situations, you'd say this is an employee that needs some retraining. But it appears that there were some complaints, there were some concerns raised, and the mechanisms within the various review commissions, boards, whatever, didn't really seize on that opportunity to work with her. And we saw kind of how it came out, and it had to be horribly embarrassing in light of the consent decree. But she indicated, I guess the question, as well as the update, is, how indicative is she of a real resistance to, seriously implementing those reforms? And as a citizen, I can't help but think that if there's not a serious commitment within the force as a whole to get that implemented, then it's going to be really tough to do. And that gets back to some of the debate that's going on about the review boards and commissions that help create the kind of culture that's necessary to make that successful. That said, a few months ago there was an online forum discussion about the police department. One thing that came out clear, there's just great respect and admiration for the police on the part of the community, and there's also an expectation that they'll conduct themselves with professional standards and respect to civil rights and all of that. So it all fits together, which is what I think the consent decree is striving to do. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts, and first of all, I'll address the Whitlatch incident. Well, let me just say this first. I've said this a lot. Nobody dislikes bad cops more than good cops, because good cops are out there and they understand their role to serve, to provide service to the community. And every time a bad cop does something stupid or makes a mistake, not only makes a mistake, but does something intentionally wrong, that makes the good people look bad. And it makes their jobs a lot more difficult. So it's up to me, and it's up to others in our department, including the new command staff, to hold people accountable when they need to be held accountable. And I don't hesitate to do that at all. I want to support the good people in the organization and help develop them and move this police department forward. But we'll get rid of the bad apples, and we'll take seriously, very seriously, any allegations of wrongdoing that we get against our officers. Let me just say, so we have an Office of Professional Accountability that's, well, it's said that it's independent from the police department. So they operate out of an office on 3rd Avenue. It's not a police facility. Pierce Murphy is the independent OPA director. He doesn't answer to me. He was appointed by the mayor, and he actually, answers to the mayor. I'm not his supervisor, so he's independent of the police department. We currently have several personnel, including a captain, a lieutenant, and several sergeants assigned to OPA to assist them in investigations. I think a lot of people think that over time, a lot of those positions should be civilianized. We should have civilian investigators, and I would certainly support that. I've supported police accountability and oversight bodies before that are civilianized, because as long as we have a large SPD presence there, people will question, whether or not these investigations are really conducted independently and objectively. So I support civilianization of those positions over time. Right now, there are several allegations that have been made against Officer Cynthia Whitlatch that are being investigated by the Office of Professional Accountability. Now, when they finish their work, when they finish those investigations, then the OPA director comes back to me and tells me whether the investigations were sustained, the allegations were sustained, and if so, a recommendation is made to me for discipline. Which can be anything from firing someone to reprimanding someone. But so then I have to make a decision. I have to decide whether to accept that recommendation from the OPA director or to reject it. But if I reject it, I have to write a letter to the mayor and the city council explaining why I rejected it. So that's there are checks and balances in the system, and it's a transparent system. So once OPA finishes their investigations, and there were originally 2 investigations, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because we learned a good lesson from this. With all the new systems that are in place under our consent decree, we'll learn lessons, how we can make these systems better going forward. There were 2 complaints. First of all, a member of the community came to headquarters to members of my command staff and said, we want to make a complaint. We're concerned that this man was treated inappropriately. We'd like you to look at the video. And initially, some of the people there said, and both of them are actually gone now, but some people said, well, this man was arrested and he pled guilty, and the case is all over. I mean, what do you want us to do now? But then the community leader called up Carmen Best, who's now my deputy chief, and said, would you please look at this video? I really want you to look at the video. And Carmen looked at the video, and she came to me immediately, and she said, I have significant concerns. I think you should look at the video too. And then I looked at the video. And then we called the city attorney's office, and we said, we want to get together with this community leader and with Mr. Wingate, whoever wanted to come in, to see how we were going to address this situation. And so we did that, and Carmen Best met with Pete Holmes and members of the city attorney's office, and a decision was made to go back to the court to have the decision vacated and to reverse any findings and to eliminate any record that Mr. Wingate had of the arrest or of the conviction. Even though he pled guilty, we just thought it was the right thing to do. So then she went one extra step, because he said, well, where's my golf club? And so Carmen went to the evidence room and found the golf club and went and presented it back to him and apologized to him for the way he was treated by the Seattle Police Department. We asked Mr. Wingate and his representative at the time, we encouraged him, we said, are you going to file a complaint with OPA? That's something we always advise people to do if they have a complaint against the police department. And they said they were not interested in going that route. They wanted more of a procedural justice. They wanted Mr. Wingate to get the right result, but they had no desire to go through the process at OPA. So we said, well, okay, fine. We'll just make sure we try to do the right thing. And so we moved along that track. On a completely parallel track, a track that I was unaware of, somebody had made a complaint to OPA, apart from the police department, apart from police headquarters, about Cynthia Whitlatch's Facebook posts. And so I I was unaware of those complaints, and OPA was unaware that we had received a complaint about her behavior. So, we learned a lesson here, and that lesson is that, in this case, what's the old saying, the left hand didn't know what the right was doing. There were two independent investigations going on, so OPA Director Pierce Murphy and I got together and said, look, we need to plug this gap to ensure that this doesn't happen again, that we're not going along two parallel tracks. And anything we do at the headquarters level, now she was sent back, at one point we knew about one incident. She was sent back and she was back to her precinct where she was supposed to be counseled and retrained and all of that, and that information is entered into a performance evaluation system. And then on a parallel track we had the OPA case. Since these issues became public, a number of other complaints were filed with OPA, and we encouraged everybody to call OPA. So there are a number of ongoing OPA investigations right now, and as soon as those are completed, the recommendations will come to me with a recommendation for the appropriate discipline in the eyes of the OPA director, and then I have to make a decision whether that is the appropriate discipline or whether I want to do something more serious or less serious. But I can't read his mind right now. I don't know where he's headed right now, but I'm hoping that these investigations will be completed soon. So I didn't mean to get into that level of detail, but I thought it was important. As many of you probably saw, I recently published a social media policy for the Seattle Police Department. Unfortunately, we had to resort to that. 99% of the police officers out there use common sense and understand that, A, nothing is secret on social media, and B, you can't make inappropriate statements if you want to be a police officer and have the trust of the community. Unfortunately, again, we have a few that don't get that or didn't get that, and so we actually developed a specific policy. Now, some would say maybe we're restricting their First Amendment rights, but I say if we're going to move in the direction of enhancing community trust, that's something we need to do. And even the union president stood up and said, look, I agree, it's inappropriate to make certain comments on social media. I backed the chief's policy and suggested if people didn't like it, they could go to another jurisdiction to work. So I thought it was very unusual, but encouraging that that was the response. So, anyway.
Okay, Richard Hurley, and then Richard will be followed by Bruce Bobzine.
Thank you for coming to West Seattle again, Chief O'Toole, and congratulations, Steve. I have a question, and I know a lot of people are interested in how our city, the city of Seattle, ranks with other major cities across the United States in the major crime categories. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have posted on the SPD website how our city ranks with all the major cities across the United States and comparable size and population cities within the United States, and how each precinct compares with other precincts in the major crime categories. I think this is more of a curiosity question, but it will also answer many questions of where we are and who we are.
Well, I appreciate that. I can say this without a doubt, and I have the statistics to show it, Seattle is one of the safest major cities in the country. But that's no consolation to people who are victims of crime. So, one crime is one too many if you're the victim of that crime. So, and its fear of crime is as damaging as crime itself. So I think it's really important that we do show people, that we try to be as transparent, show people what's happening in their individual neighborhoods. One of the things we're hoping to do with our new technologies is to have this information right online, so you can go in, click on your click on a link and determine exactly what's happening in your neighborhood. Also see what's happening in other neighborhoods in the city, so you can make those comparisons yourself. I was really concerned last year when we saw a huge spike in property crime. The spike in property crime was quite alarming, and so we really try to focus. We take accurate and timely data now and try to map hotspots and trends so that we can allocate our resources accordingly to address those particular types of crimes. I'll give you one example. We had a significant increase in robberies in the South Precinct during the fall, and we could see it happening within days. And then we called the captain and not only looked at the hotspot where this was happening, but we looked at time of day, day of the week, to see what other trends, and then we made sure that we had police there during the times of day and days of the week when these robberies were happening. And within a month, we reduced them by more than 50%. So it just goes to show that if we use our resources in a smart, responsible way, we can make a difference. I think I'm not sure I said this the last time I was here. Somebody was asking me to compare Seattle to Boston, and because they're similarly sized cities. In fact, the week I moved out here during the summer, I read in the newspaper that Seattle just surpassed Boston in population. So I said, my husband Dan, who's in the back of the room, and I think we tipped the scales. And now we've got Bobby Murner too, so everybody's moving west. So Seattle's growing by leaps and bounds. But it is, and Seattle has a footprint twice as big as Boston, a geographic footprint, yet we have between 800 and 1,000 fewer police officers here. Probably because it's been a lot safer city. I mean, Boston's a fairly safe city compared to most other major cities in the country, but Seattle's even safer. But, I'm concerned about increases in crime that not only we're experiencing here in Seattle, but there seems to be a trend in most major cities right now. So we need to keep a really close eye on it. We've been able to address the car thefts and the car prowls were through the roof last year. And comparing it this year, I think we're down 17%, because we've really tried to focus on the areas where these are happening. So we're making some progress on the property crime. Still concerned about some of the robberies that are happening, some of the gang tensions that are out there. But again, there's some great police work going on. We've made some good arrests, and thankfully, Seattle's in a relatively good place, but my hope is that we'll be in a much better place.
All right, Bruce next, and then after Bruce is Jane Taylor.
I don't know how long we get to keep saying welcome to Seattle. I don't know if the statute of limitations runs out in a year or not, but for the other Bostonians as well that came in, my brother lives in Groton, just outside of Boston. So I keep giving him a hard time. You deserve what you get as far as the bad weather is concerned with beating our Seahawks. We never hold a grudge here at all. But in terms of, I'm just kind of curious, you're talking about in terms of, I think, grabbing as far as the analytics, big data and whatnot, and with the guy coming in from Amazon, I think that's fantastic. It's going to be really exciting. In terms of just from a simple block watch perspective and community policing, I'd be interested in hearing the things that you were doing, accomplishing in Boston, that perhaps you're interested in doing here.
Well, I appreciate that. One of the things that's really struck me when I've come out to community meetings like this one here tonight is that people in this city are really engaged. I mean, they engage civically, and that's a wonderful thing. I was hard-pressed to get a crowd like this at a Boston community meeting, unless, of course, there was a major, disaster or some horrible crime had occurred. So I think it's great that on a day-to-day basis here, people do engage. We really want to figure out a way to increase that engagement, not only, at the command level, but even more important at the police officer level. Getting police officers out there on the beat, more visible, and trying to engage, get to know members of the community better, on a human level. That's very important. So we're going to work on that. I'll just give you an example of actually, I think Bobby Murray was a part of this a few years ago, but the last year that I was in Boston, we were losing police officers. We lost about 15% of our personnel because of budget cuts. We were really up against a lot of challenges. And we were having an increase in gang violence. And in Boston, we learned a long time ago that the only way we could really make a difference was to work collaboratively with other partners, with education, with social services, health services, everybody come together in a multidisciplinary approach to try to prevent and intervene rather than wait for the tragedy to happen or the crime to happen. So that was our way of doing business there. Some of you probably heard about the Boston Miracle years ago. We went from 154 murders in the early 1990s down to 31 in the late 90s. Now, one is one too many, as I said before, but made a significant difference with this multidisciplinary approach. So hopefully you'll see a lot more of that here in Seattle. But this one summer, we expected a really tough summer, and we saw gang violence increasing. So we said to the gang squad and others, and our other partners in education and social services and parole and probation, we said, let's go out and find the 1,000 kids in this city that are most likely to be hurt or pull a trigger this summer, and let's try to get into that home with a multidisciplinary team. And I believe in about 800 instances we were able to get into the home and during the spring before the summer started and try to come up with an approach, often saying to a parent or a grandparent, what do you need? Does this young person need a job? Does this young person need an educational program? Do the younger kids need a summer camp? What do you need in terms of social services? Trying to help that family to prevent a tragedy later in the summer. Now, it's tough to quantify how many lives we saved that summer, but there's no question in my mind that lives were saved. That we didn't realize, the worst nightmare that we anticipated that particular summer. So I would just say that we know that the multidisciplinary approach works. We know that prevention and intervention are more important than enforcement. We'll always have to enforce. There'll be some people who just don't get the message or don't want to move in the direction of a program, but our preference is to try to keep them on the right track, or if they start to go off track, to get them back on track, as Captain Wilski alluded to earlier. Oh, Chief Wilski. Well, he's not I don't know where his stars are. He's supposed to have his stars in his phone. He hasn't had time to buy them yet. So. Sorry, Chief.
So Jane Taylor, and then she'll be followed by Deb Barker.
Chief, I'm interested in finding out what some of the specifics are that you have for complying with the consent decree and addressing some of the inequities between the police department and the African American community. I like your idea of, and this is a new verb to me, civilianizing the OPA. And I'd like to also ask, what are things that people like myself and people in this room can do to help you in that effort?
Well, thank you very much. We can use all the help we can get, believe me. First of all, let me say something about the consent decree. I just left the monitor before I came here. Eric Bob, our federal monitor, was in town. He comes to town every few weeks. I make sure I get together with him personally, and he also meets with several members of our team. Thankfully, he issues a report every 6 months, and thankfully the last report he issued was much more favorable. It indicates that we still have lots of work to do. It's a very ambitious document, so we have a lot of requirements to meet, but we're definitely moving in the right direction and moving full speed ahead. So we're working closely with him. We work with our Community Policing Commission, the CPC. We have representatives from all over the city, a very diverse group of people who participate on the CPC, so we try to get together with them regularly too, and get their recommendations and their support in implementing many of the consent decree requirements. I'd say the biggest accomplishments to date is we had to put together a whole new set of policies and procedures under the consent decree, including things like use of force, or dealing with people in crisis, or I could go on, but arrest procedures. When we're allowed to stop people and not stop people and all of that. So all the new policies and procedures were completed last year, they were developed, and then our officers had to go through a very substantial amount of training. And And we have an equally rigorous training program this year. So they have to be trained in all of these new policies and procedures as well. So we met all of the training requirements last year, and now we have a lot of training requirements this year. You know, at the end of the day, it's not just about ticking boxes and saying, oh, we got that done, we got that done, we got that done. You know, I think we talked to the DOJ recently, the people from the Civil Rights Division in Washington, and we said in addition to showing the data, you know, we think there should be a narrative. You know, when the union president stands up and takes a pretty courageous stand and says, no, you can't do this stuff on social media, I mean, that's a change. I don't think that would have happened a few years ago. So we need to take we need to establish a narrative that will also, you know, align with all the requirements that we need to meet. But it's not just about ticking boxes. We need to enhance our the trust of our community, and that will take time. And we need our officers to develop pride, and you know, because a lot of the pride has been lost too, especially for the good officers out there who have been, you know, felt demoralized in recent years because it's been a tough time. So I think we're on the right track, no question about it, but there is a lot of work to be done, so I need to acknowledge that too. How can you help? Well, I hope that if you do see officers out there who are doing good things, that would be nice to hear. You know, we need to know, you know, what's working, but we also need to know what's not working. And I don't want people to hesitate to call us. I mean, if you have an OPA complaint, definitely call OPA. We need our officers and all of us to be accountable. But even if you have a suggestion as to how we can do business better, or you know, you don't like the way something's occurred, you know, maybe you have a complaint about a response to a lower priority call, or an issue you had when you called 911. We need to hear that, because we will only get better if we hear, you know, that criticism, that constructive criticism.
Jeff Barker, who will be followed by Carla Rogers.
Chief, it's ironic that you brought that topic up. My name is Deb Barker. I'm the president of the Morgan Community Association, and it's one of the several neighborhood organizations here in West Seattle. We have a park in Morgan Junction called Morgan Junction Park. So one of the things that I was going to ask you the last time you were here, and sidebar, thank you for coming back, because we were all very frustrated that we didn't get to fully engage with you that evening, and I just want to give you my personal thanks for coming back to West Seattle. We're very glad to have you here. I was going to ask you to, and my question was going to be coming up right before Pete closed the meeting at the last time, so I was going to ask you to role play a response that a 911 operator should be giving to a low priority call. We have challenges with Morgan Junction Park sometimes, and we've been instructed to call 911 or the non-emergency number and report it. Just keep reporting it, keep reporting it, keep reporting it. And we try and get that word out to the community, keep reporting it. And we hear back that some of those exchanges are not, it's probably worse than watching what's going on. So I was hoping that you, maybe even Captain Wilski, would like to do some role playing about Chief, sorry. Would some officers like to role play some 911 responses to people who are calling to report things that they see going on again and again and again and again? Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, because, you know, most of us, we report priority calls and Part 1 crimes and all of that, but, you know, most of us are concerned about quality of life issues in our neighborhoods. And, you know, it's not the serious crime that impacts all of us day to day, it's the nuisance crimes and the quality of life issues in our neighborhoods. And if we don't address those, it's an invitation to more serious crimes. So we need to address them. Two issues. First of all, Mayor Murray has even acknowledged that we don't have enough police in the city. So too often, we have police officers, we don't even have enough police officers to answer 911 calls. And the city goes on or the precinct will go on priority calls, meaning that they're only responding to the priority 1, crimes in progress, mostly crimes against people. And of course, that has to be the number 1 priority. And then the priority 2 calls about, the nuisance activity happening in your neighborhoods, go to the bottom of the list. And it's very frustrating. It's frustrating not only to me as the police chief, but it's frustrating to me as a resident of the city as well. So we're doing 2 things. Mayor Murray, first of all, said that he was going to hire 100 more police during his term in office, and we're in the process of doing that. We've accelerated our recruitment and our hiring so that we can meet his goal of 100 more. But on a parallel track, he said also do a resource allocation study, a scientific resource allocation study to determine how many cops we really need in the city. So we have a contractor who's come in who has the ability to do that. And lots of factors have to be taken into consideration. Calls for service, the number of calls for service, the geography of the city, the demographics of the city, there are lots of different factors, the population of the city or certain neighborhoods. All these different factors have to be taken into consideration to determine how many cops we actually need. So we're getting 100 more, but we're also, I'd say late spring, early summer, we're actually going to have a proposal that will go to, a report that will go to the mayor and the city council saying how many more police we need, so that they won't just be answering 911 calls, that we'll have enough police to also, they won't only be answering priority 1 calls, we'll have police officers to deal with some of the other lower priority issues that are important. We also, on a parallel track, have people looking at the way we handle our 911 center right now, the way we accept calls and the way we dispatch calls, because I'm very concerned about that from a customer service perspective. And you read some of the stories in the newspaper, I'm sure during the summer, shortly after I arrived. Danny Westmead had his column about his wife's cell phone being stolen from her car. But there are other concerns too about lower priority calls and property crimes that aren't getting, that are taking long delayed, we're having long delayed response times. So we're trying to figure out exactly how we can, if we need to update our procedures, if we need to retrain our personnel in the 911 center. We're trying to figure out better ways to do business so that people aren't frustrated. I was at a community meeting in the East Precinct, and one man said to me, Chief, calling in a non-emergency call to the Seattle PD is like calling our local, I won't use the name of the company because then I'll probably be sued. Calling our local cable company. and right away, I said that struck a chord with me because I've had to sit on hold for minutes and hours at a time. I went into the 911 center not too long ago. I wanted to get a sense for it firsthand, and they have a board up there that has a timer on it, and in big red letters it said 29 minutes. And I said, oh, well, that's not too bad if it's taking us 29 minutes to get to a lower priority call. And he said, oh, no, Chief, it's taking us 29 minutes to talk to the person on the phone. And I said, well, that's unacceptable. We need to figure out a way to resolve that. So it's a work in progress. I recognize it's a serious problem. And so we need to get, but the dispatchers are at a loss. If they don't have anybody to give that call to, it's not their fault. They're the ones who are just taking the 911 calls. But we need to figure out if there are ways, business processes, we can improve our processes to do it better.
Okay, Carl Rogers, followed by Sandy Adams.
I really hate microphones. I'm here tonight, I'm the president of the Madison PTSA. We are, as parents in the community, just really concerned about all the things that have been happening in West Seattle. We've got a safety meeting that my PTA put together next week at the school because our parents are just kind of frantic. we don't have buses for our middle school and high school. And I actually love the fact that my kids walk to school because it's good exercise. But what that also opens them up to is, being out there and being, the target of someone trying to steal a cell phone or knock over a kid at a bus stop to get his backpack. And it's just scary. So in addition to, and thanks to Tracy for covering all these incidents, just in the past 3 months, we've had, half a dozen incidents. And it's not just down in Westwood and some of the other areas that you spoke to, having heavily watched areas. It's up here. And I just would like to know, with you leaving, how can we make sure that transition with the new person that coming in, that we're actually doing something about this and maybe getting more eyes on the bus stops and more eyes on the schools before and after. I just want to feel like I can tell our parents that, your kids are going to be safe when they go to school.
What's more important than that? You're absolutely right. First of all, Chief Wilski is going to have, I'm giving him the opportunity to handpick his successor here, so, and I know he wants to be certain that there's a smooth transition here. And, by the way, he's already committed to spending considerable time. Each day he's going to be in a different precinct. He said, he doesn't want to be saddled at a desk at headquarters. He wants to be out here, so I still think you'll see him very visible here. Every morning, actually throughout the day, we get reports. They're called serious incident reports. And the chief will tell you that every time I get one about West Seattle, particularly about this string of strong-armed robberies and the incidents involving the students, I'm immediately in touch with him, and he's immediately in touch with his personnel as well. We've been very concerned about it. Usually, this is somewhat cyclical. Usually, it's the same people, the same perpetrators, or a small group of perpetrators, and if we are able to catch them and take them into custody or, get them into a diversion program, usually that eliminates the problem or it significantly reduces the problem. So it's my hope that, we haven't had a strong-arm robbery of that nature, right?
No,
Since
that series actually ended on the 4th when he
4th
arrested
of
him.
February, right? But we need to keep a close eye on it. I would love to, I think that's an example of how we can work together. It would be great to work with your organization to determine how collectively we can, keep an eye on these kids. We can't have a police officer on every block, unfortunately. We just don't have enough of them. But, maybe there are good educational programs for the kids. We can give the kids some good tips. Make sure you conceal your phones, be aware of your surroundings, all of that, so we can give them some good safety tips. But also work with you to try to figure out, how we can have some eyes and ears out there, especially when they're coming and going to school. So it's, the police will try to be out there as much as we can, but maybe we can, it's a multiplier if we can work together with some of the parents to provide some of that visibility as well. So why don't we try to schedule a follow-up? I'll ask the chief to do that, and we can work with your organization, come up with some good solution to that.
Sandy Adams?
I just want to say I'm glad that the chief is going to handpick his successor. And I just want to emphasize that I think all of us in this room would really appreciate some stability in that position in this precinct, and that we would have whoever he picks by hand with us for a long time.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a really good point. And because I've not only heard that here, but I've heard it in other precincts too, that people really do want that continuity. And I'll put him on the spot tonight by, again, reinforcing that I want the continuity here, and I'm sure he wants the continuity here. So let's just say this, he's not leaving. He'll have other responsibilities, but, he'll pick somebody good to sit in the seat here, and he'll still be very visible and very involved here. So, that's just the way he does business, so I'm sure you'll see a lot of them going forward. And we'll try to, I mean, unfortunately, you can't stand in the way of the good people. You know, I'm sure that, you know, selfishly, you know, it'd be great for me to leave him here. I'd never have to worry about it. But also, you know, we can use him to help shape policy across the city. So, we won't let you down.
My hope would be is that when we make the assignments in the different precincts, that it's a 2-year assignment. So absent person getting promoted or leaving the department, retiring or something, it would be a 2-year assignment in each precinct.
One of the other things we announced today is we're going to work with the Seattle Police Management Association, SPMA. It's the union for the lieutenants and captains, and we're going to work hard on a professional development program. So we're going to work with the different universities, private sector, public sector, and try to come up with a leadership and management development program so that not only the captains, but all the lieutenants, and then hopefully, you know, we'll eventually work on the sergeants as well, so that even if the captains move on after a couple of years, you're still going to have good, solid leadership at the mid-level ranks, and also a good pool of people to move into those captain's positions. So that's our hope.
Cindy Parker, followed by Lisa Herbal.
Hello, welcome, and thank you, Captain Chief. Steve. I'm just going to call him Steve, that's okay. So I'm going to change the topic slightly, and for context for the other people, the Office of Emergency Management lives within the police department. And so we've sort of stayed away from you from your first year because you've been really busy. Emergency preparedness is a really big thing here in West Seattle, right? If the bridge goes down, we were going to be an island. Now the South Park Bridge is back, but so we want to make sure that you have an excellent director at the Office of Emergency Management, and we have a really good partnership with her in a group called the Emergency Communication Hubs. And West Seattle was one of the first groups to adopt that. It's now grown to 47 hubs across the city. And so while we have that great relationship with them, we have kind of a gaposis with your police group and the command staff. And here in West Seattle, it really started with Captain Paulson challenged the community leaders of the community groups to think about how they would take care of their community while the city's really trying to respond on a larger level. And that was the genesis of hubs here in West Seattle. And then Captain Davis, when we said, you know, it's really hard to do outreach to the police department. You know, we'll grab a cop who's walking by at one of the festivals and we'll say, do you know about the emergency hubs? And sometimes they do, and mostly they don't. So Captain Davis suggested we make a video about the hubs so that it could be shown at roll call. So there's a real consistent, here's what hubs are, here's what they do. And I see a lot of our citizen actors from our drills here tonight. So my question for you is, as you move forward, what is your thinking about community engagement in emergency preparedness, and how can you enroll your officers to be more participatory in that?
That's a great question and a great point. Thank you very much. So just a little bit of background. At one point, I served as Secretary of Public Safety in Massachusetts, and coincidentally, emergency management for the state was one of the agencies under my area of responsibility. So I was fortunate to have the exposure to learn more about emergency management in that position than I'd ever been exposed to in my police career prior to that. I'm not saying I'm an emergency management expert, but thankfully I had more exposure to it than most, and gained a great appreciation for it. It's interesting you asked that. When I went to meet with Mayor Murray, the first night I met with Mayor Murray, you know, I thought he was going to ask me all these questions about my police experience, and he said, look, obviously you've been a cop for a long time and a detective. He said, what happens if we have an earthquake? What do you know about emergency management? And it was a really good point. And thankfully, I was able to cite, you know, some of my experience and emphasize the importance of it. I'm also pleased to say that one of the outsiders that I hired today to be an assistant chief is currently the emergency management director in Yakima. He also, on a parallel track, does some gang intervention, because for years, he was a Tucson police officer, and he had responsibility for emergency management there. So he has a national reputation, in a national network of people that he engages with on a regular basis involved in emergency management. I'm really pleased that you mentioned Barb Graff, our emergency management director. The emergency management does fall under the police department, but it's kind of an interesting relationship because Barb comes to all our command staff meetings, and she's a really valuable member of our team, but she's also a member of the mayor's cabinet. So she really reports to the mayor, but is also a part of the police department. She is second to none. She is the best in the country. We're very, very fortunate to have her. So I'm hoping, and I'm glad that you mentioned it because we'll put it at the top of the priority list when Perry gets on board. Perry and Barb and I can get together and we can talk, and then we can come out and meet with you and really figure out how we're going to take this forward and get it right. Because there's no question about it. Whether it's a natural disaster, man-made disaster, we need to be prepared. So thanks for that.
Okay, Lisa, followed by Brenda Divers.
Hello. A comment and then two questions. The first comment is, in 2007, the City Council, along with the mayor, worked to pass the then neighborhood policing plan, and I worked with Pete Spalding here. He was the chair of the Precinct Advisory Council for West Seattle, and we worked to bring together the precinct's representation from all over the city. We had a big event in City Hall, and that led to the passage of a plan that committed to 105 new officers in 5 years. The administration later, in the recession, that plan was shelved. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on it again, but just wanted to point out that in 2007, the plan was to hire 105 new officers. So, and now we're looking at 100. So that number wasn't just grabbed out of the air. There was a lot of analysis. We weren't just comparing Seattle to other cities of comparable sizes. So I would ask that you take a look at that.
Well, I really appreciate that because I was unaware of that particular plan, so I will take a look at it. And if you imagine, since 2007, this place has grown by leaps and bounds, and it's the fastest growing city in the U.S. right now. So, yeah. And I'll also share it with the consultant who's doing our long-term resource allocation study.
And then a question, and followed by another. The first is something that was very popular in Seattle, again, before the recession, were community service officers. And I'm wondering if you're looking at those.
I love that. You're talking about civilian communities?
Yes.
I love that idea. I just heard about that recently, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think we need to sit down and talk about it and talk to the mayor and
They can do a lot of work that
yeah,
isn't
it's great that
necessarily-
they go out and take reports and they go out and do things that don't require yeah, so we'll definitely take a look at that.
And then my third point is, today I'm running for City Council, District 1, and today I started my evening with Hassan Dees, who introduced me to a number of Somali families in High Point, and we sat down and we talked about their public safety challenges. And one thing they'd really like the police department to look at is identifying a community liaison for their community.
Right, I think we received hundreds of applications for that position, and it's being narrowed down at this point, so
there is
that will happen very soon.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
this is a good segue because we have a written question along the same line. It says, how is SPD planning to better serve our East African immigrant communities? So maybe you could just expand a little bit on that.
Great, thank you. So a few ways, we are in the process of hiring a liaison to the East African community, but we also just reestablished our East African Advisory Committee. Apparently there was one that existed at one point, and then it somehow got off track, and so we reestablished that and had a meeting recently. Deputy Chief Carmen Best and Captain John Hayes have been responsible for our community outreach, and so I've asked them to really focus on that. The East African community here is growing rapidly. One of the things I want to do is, we really need to go out and citywide and we do a really good, solid recruiting program for both our sworn and non-sworn positions. I've always said that if a police service is going to be credible, it needs to reflect the community it serves. So we want to get out there and identify more people representing a variety of communities to work for the SPD. So we not only are establishing relationships externally, but we also have more diverse population in our ranks.
Brenda Divers. And Brenda will be followed by Heinz Gelhar.
Good evening. So my community policing question was already addressed. So I guess I'm just going to ask you if you are doing anything or what you're doing for officer morale, just in light of just recent media and DOJ in town the last couple of years and just all the changes and stuff. Like, do you? And I don't know if that's something you can share with us, but.
One of the things, up to the microphone, oh, sorry. I have an inherent fear of microphones, I just have never really liked those, so. One of the things, like I said, I've been on the department for almost 30 years, 28 years now. And one of the things I want to do, and both it's because I can escape my office, is probably the primary thing I want to do for officers is go out and talk to them. I'm going to pick a precinct every week. 5 days a week, I've got 5 precincts. So Monday, I'm going to come in, do my hopefully less than 2 hours of desk work, and then I'm going to be out in the precinct. And just talking to guys, listening to what they have to say, and if they have a problem, it's my job to fix it. It's not something that we do often enough, to just go out and talk to them. What are the issues? What don't you like? If there's a decision, making sure that I may not be able to convince them that the decision was right, but I can at least convince them of, listen, this was a thought process behind the decision. There are times that, like, one of the things that I've been asked is, well, is we recently had a directive go out that lieutenants and above can continue to wear the light blue shirt. And people are, well, why is that? Well, there's some guild issues or management issues going on in regards to reimbursement. So just people just having them understand, listen, this is the decision or this is the policy, but this was the thought process behind it. And if they have a better idea, some of the things in some of the media interviews I ended up doing today, in my experience in the homicide unit, in the CSI unit, and SWAT, the best ideas come from the people who have to actually implement it. Talk to them. Like I said, I'm going to have coffee with guys on a daily basis in one of the precincts. And if they have a good idea, the best way to bolster morale is if they have a good idea, the next time they show up for their shift, it's implemented if we can. And again, trying to explain to them when we can't do something, explain to them why that is.
Okay, so don't laugh at me, but I have to confess, maybe it's my Boston accent. So when you said, what are you going to do about officer morale? I thought it was Officer Morel. That's why I looked over to the chief, because I thought, oh, what did that Officer Morel do? Anyway, but Officer Morale is, and I agree with the chief. It's very important. I mean, you know, we want people to be proud of it. You know, I talk a lot about policing. You know, you people obviously have engaged with the police department. Most of you understand what policing is all about. You watch television; it's all about gunfights and car chases. That's not what policing is really about. It's about providing service to people. I mean, 95% of policing is about responding to people's calls for service and trying to help people. It's not about arresting people. It's not about gunfights and car chases. But we need to give them the support and the tools that they need to do the job. We need to give them the direction they need. You know, I think there's been so much uncertainty lately. Police officers they want direction. You know, that they want good leadership, and hopefully we can provide that. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think they're pleased with some of the training they're getting now. They're certainly pleased with some of the equipment they're getting now. And we need to give them, the good police officers, the support they deserve. So, but if that Officer Morrell gets in any trouble, I'm gonna make sure that he or she is held accountable.
Hines Gellar, followed by Mandy St. Helming. And if you still want to ask a question, the sign-up sheet is still over here on the table. So come up and sign up. And if you don't specifically want to stand up and ask a question, you just want to write it on cards. There's some cards over here on the table as well.
I've been noticing, like you said, it's the press that shows us what the police is doing. And we see the guy with the golf club. And we see the guy that gets shot by a police officer. My problem is that I have never seen any of our leadership, politicians or anybody, ever stand up and say, hey, if you are accosted by a police officer, your first move is, yes, sir, no, sir, and, oh, what's your badge number? And do what the police officer asks you to go do. If you do that, all the other problems that you hear in the press will go away. We don't teach that. We don't proselytize it. The mayor has never said that. The police chief has never said that. The students never hear that in school. That's my question.
I think it's a statement. Yeah, I was brought up with it. My grandfather was a police officer, so we were always taught, to be respectful. I mean, it needs to be mutual respect. In order for it to work, it has to be mutual respect. The police need to respect the community, and the community need to respect the police. And we may not always agree. I even say that to the union people in our own organization. Maybe we won't agree, but on a human level, we need to have mutual respect and try to engage and try to come to a resolution when we disagree. So, but I'm all for it, mutual respect. So I'll go out there and tell the police officers that they need to respect the community, and I'll really appreciate it when the community also shows respect to the police. Thank you for that. Well, Pete's left now. He's probably gone to look for Officer Morrell.
I don't know if we'll find that person, but when we do.
You're right around.
Hi, my name is Amanda K. Helmick, and I am the chair of the Westwood Roxville Arbor Heights Community Council, which is down in the Westwood Village area. And I would like to thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciated the last 13 months. It actually makes me a little choked up, because every time we had a situation, we would just ask the captain, and he would get back to us right away. And it was always with a plan. And then he would come to us with these ideas of, hey, give me 3 things that we can do to help your community. And I'd send him an email, and he'd send it right back. And it's been like that, and I've been talking to him pretty much all day today. And I'm angry in some ways that you're stealing him. Because honestly, we've had a couple of captains. We've had policing issues for years in that area. But it's really only been in the last 13 months that we've seen some really wonderful changes happening between having beat cops walking the park at Roxville Parks, listening to our ideas, seeing police officers in the neighborhood on a regular basis. So I really applaud you, and I applaud you for seeing the value. I hope you pick someone.
Well, by the way, you still have his email address.
Oh, no. And I have his cell phone, and he answers it, and I know he'll get back to me. So I have to say that, so thank you so much.
I'll get you somebody
The one question that I do have for you is that I have a friend who wanted to be a police officer. She chose to be something else and thought, this is really what I want to do, is I want to be an officer. And she went through the training, and she went through the physical aspects of it. She went through all the testing. And when it came to there's a simulation question of what would you do if you saw this situation? And the way she answered the question, she felt that it was appropriate. And what she was told is she was not hired because she wouldn't have applied the proper level of force. And the scenario is that she saw a homeless person or somebody walking in the middle of the street, and that person, when she's trying to move that person off to the side of the road, that person accidentally hits them officer on the hand. What do you do? And her answer was to check to make sure that they're okay. And she was told that that was wrong. And my question is if good officers like her can't get hired, and we're hiring officers who would have excessive force ideas, or hiring officers who their mission is to, look at citizens as criminals or someone that would do them harm, how do we hire a police force that are peace officers and not officers that feel that they're in a war zone?
Well, I appreciate that, and you know what, I mean this sincerely. If you'd like to refer her our way, I'll make sure you have the contact details, and I'll sit down, we'll talk to her and figure out what went awry there, because maybe she's still interested in pursuing a career, so we can talk about that. And I want to make a point. One of the things I've ordered recently is a study of our whole continuum of HR, how we recruit people, how we investigate people, how we train people, how we field train people, and how we give them ongoing professional development and training. So I don't know what happened in that particular instance, but on a case-by-case basis, we definitely want to talk to people if they think they've been treated unfairly in the training process or in the recruitment process. But we want people, generally who are going to apply. They're going to de-escalate situations, not escalate situations, and use the minimum force necessary when they have to. So, I'm sorry that she had an, unfortunate experience, but I'd love to follow up and find out exactly what happened in that instance. I would have shared my microphone.
I know, but Pete asked me to come out here, so, yeah. Anyway, I'm Karen Berge with the West Seattle Blockwatch Captains Network, and I actually, this is just a question of my own. We do a lot of outreach, and we talk to a lot of folks, and so anecdotally, one of the things that I've heard is that a lot of the crime that we see here, some of it originates outside of West Seattle and outside of Seattle. And I've heard that kids that don't even necessarily have cars and drive come up from places like Covington on the Sounder commuter train, commit some crimes, and then go back with loot and sell it on Craigslist. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit to some of the cross-jurisdictional issues, and not just thefts and Craigslist, but also maybe cross-jurisdictional issues having to do with other organizations, like people that are scamming senior citizens, people that are doing identity theft. There's some IRS scams, things like that. So all of the cross-jurisdictional things that aren't just quality of life issues where someone prowls your car, but more about the types of things that happen in the background and you don't really necessarily even feel like you should call 911. So, thank you.
Thank you. There are so many. We had a presentation at headquarters last week by a guy, Mark Goodman, who wrote this book about future crimes. And boy, when he starts talking about the crime that's happening on the internet right now, it's frightening. I mean, how many victims there are out there that we never know about. We probably never know about. We're trying to work. We need to harness our resources. We really do. Not just to answer 911 calls, but to answer all of these other complicated problems that are emerging out there. So we're working much more closely now with our federal partners. We're working like the Secret Service, for instance. I believe it's the Secret Service that has an identity crimes or a internet crimes task force. so we work closely with them. We're working more closely with the FBI. We just recently established a gun crime task force working with the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They just moved several of their agents into one of our facilities to work with our person who does tracing of guns and also analyzes ballistic evidence. And already, just in a very short time, like a week, they have 3 hits.
3 guns.
There's 3 guns and 7 hits, connecting different crimes. So by working with these other partners who have resources that we don't necessarily have, it's really helpful. The Seattle Police Department, apparently in the past, wasn't inclined to participate a lot with the King County Chiefs Association. I mean, I know it's tough to find time to go to all those meetings and everything, but I've really made it a point to try to participate with WASPIC, which is the state chiefs organization, and also with the King County Chiefs, because crime doesn't have borders. It doesn't have geographical, or it doesn't, it crosses our different cities and towns. So we really need to work collaboratively together. You're absolutely right. So we're trying to participate in as many task forces as possible with our other partners to try to harness resources. And we're open to suggestions as to how we can improve that too. And it's not just about participating with other law enforcement organizations. We need to participate, with other non-law enforcement organizations that harness our resources too. I was today at a meeting with the woman who heads up, who's the director of the Office Against, Violence Against Women, in DC, that does all the domestic violence work, the federal programs around domestic violence. It was a great meeting because the police had a seat at the table, but it was a multi-agency, multidisciplinary, collaborative effort, and that's the only way we're going to address some of these complicated issues. We talk about, a lot of people are saying to me, what are you going to do about downtown street disorder? I said, well, that's a pretty broad term that people use to describe a lot of complicated things. Downtown, we have a lot of homeless people who are in dire straits, who need our help, who are, desperate because they're economic, they don't have the money to live in homes. We have lots of people in crisis who also need help. Many of them are homeless too. And then we have drug dealers who are preying on people who are vulnerable. Now, I can take care of the drug dealers, but it gets a lot more complicated when we're trying to provide solutions to people who are homeless or people in crisis. So we need to, again, have a multidisciplinary approach to all that. So I think I mentioned that earlier when you said, what's your method of, what did you do in Boston? Well, it was always multidisciplinary. It was always harness all our resources, bring as many people to the table as possible with good ideas, and work as a team on some of these complicated things.
I'm going to read this question. This might be a real question. So someone gave us the question. My neighbor owns the apartment at 17th Southwest in Henderson. She says the church across the street amplifies their music, etc., way above code. Why doesn't the city enforce the noise ordinance?
I do know that it is actually fairly complicated to enforce the noise ordinance because decibel readings. What my preference would be is if that person would be willing to come up and talk to me after this, is we'll get them hooked up with a CPT officer. We'll have a CPT officer probably here in Nicholson take the lead on that, and let's see if we can fix it without enforcement. I would be just as happy with that as rather than writing somebody a ticket or making them go to court. Let's just fix it. So for the person with that question, if you please be willing to see me after the meeting, I can get the information and we'll get started on it tomorrow morning. Okay.
So you might want to stay there for a second, Joe. Who will answer this one? It says, should we consider hiring our own security teams for our blocks? 3 stolen cars in 10 days made us wonder.
Wow.
I mean, everybody has to make their own decisions on that. It's not something that I strongly advocate, especially if it's not like an off-duty officer. we're getting additional staffing, we're getting bicycle officers. I understand that auto theft has been a problem, although it's been trending down. But again, just like we've always talked about at some of the different meetings, it doesn't matter that the numbers are lower if it's your car that's gotten stolen. My preference would be, obviously, for us to handle it. We are getting additional staffing. We're putting a lot of emphasis on auto thefts and processing stolen vehicles for fingerprints. Because as we all know, a very small number of the auto thieves are doing a majority of the stolen cars. We made some very significant arrests in South Park about 2 weeks ago, and actually we saw the auto thefts drop down to 1 or 2 a week, where usually we're up over 10. So I do think we are making some progress. But again, I can't tell somebody that they can't do it, but I'm not a super big fan of private security. I don't know what their training standards are. I don't know how stable they are, how good they are at their job. And I know that the police officers, especially the ones you have in Southwest Seattle, are probably some of the best around, so.
Okay. The next person that signed up is Scott McGee.
Welcome again. And I just want to say how impressed I was by your hires. I'm a relatively new person to Seattle, but I think the hire for Amazon is great. I think that speaks a lot to what you bring to the position, and I appreciate what you guys do. I know it's a tough job. 2 questions. You had said earlier, if we have some feedback, like we want to send an attaboy, attagirl, is there an email or mailbox we can send that information to?
When in doubt, just send it to me. I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
Okay.
We actually do have one, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know it right now. I think it's we have Mike Wagers, our Chief Operating Officer, here with us too, and the Public Information Office falls under him. And I think there's a way to, by the way, 2 things. We're big on Twitter. We have over 100,000 Twitter followers right now in the SPD. What are we, second to the NYPD? And come on, they have 30,000 police officers, so we're doing okay. So, don't be afraid to share tweets. We're also, by the way, moving in the direction of Nextdoor. The Seattle Police Department was one of the first to sign up, and we're going to communicate a lot with our neighborhoods through the Nextdoor app. Renee Witt is here from my team. Renee, she used to work in public information, so.
Yes, Chief, that email address is SPD_recognition@seattle.gov.
Oh, good. So it's SPD_recognition@seattle.gov. But I mean, how cool to share it on Twitter or Nextdoor. That's SPD_recognition@seattle.gov.
I just saw some people typing it in their phones and writing it, so I want to give them an opportunity to make sure they got it.
I trust you.
Would posting something on Facebook be something as well? Can you friend on Facebook and then just
Oh yeah,
say
we
it
have
out
a
loud?
Facebook page. We have a
Oh, really?
Facebook page. Yeah, absolutely. And Facebook, Twitter, pretty much every means of.
Yeah.
And I think, that's great because, it really gives, I think the officers really appreciate that. And I try to reach out personally when I get these serious incident reports, but it's not just good arrests, it's really important to acknowledge people who, treat people with dignity, who are respectful to people, who really help solve problems. So I know how much they really appreciate that, so thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
Because I encourage everybody to write in with their complaints and to report things to OPA, so I want to make sure that I also encourage people to acknowledge the good officers out there who deserve it.
Sure. Second question. So we lived in West Seattle less than 6 months, and I've already had my wheels and rims ripped off. So I've been a victim of. It's nothing. Nobody died. It's not a life and death thing, but it's just annoying. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are hiring extra people. Whatever we can do in the community to support that. If 100, if that's going to be enough, if you need more than that, good Lord knows we spend a bunch of money in Seattle on a bunch of stuff. And I think we ought to spend as much as we possibly can to support you guys.
Well, thank you very much, I appreciate that. And, you know, we're really trying to focus on the car prowls and the car thefts because they had gone up considerably last year. It's not just a Seattle phenomenon, apparently it's happening throughout the Pacific Northwest. So this area is one of the highest in the country, if not the highest in the country right now for property crime. So we're working on the car prowls and the car thefts. We're working very closely with the King County prosecutor, with Mr. Satterberg's office, because they sit with us every 2 weeks now in a process we call CSTAT, where we look at all the hot spots, we analyze all the data, we see where everything's happening, and they see the same things we're seeing now. So because they're sitting side by side with us, and we said to them, what are we going to do? Because you know, this region has a reputation for being lenient on property crime. And as a result, you know, people get arrested, the police go out and do their jobs, but soon they're back out in the community doing the same activity within a matter of hours or days. So it can be frustrating for everybody, for the victims and for the police and others. But I think we're working more collaboratively now with the prosecutor. And I know that they're really working with us on the prolific car thieves. And you get one of those people off the street, it's amazing what a dent it makes in the crime rate.
Brenda, Donner?
A couple of things. You talked about the homeless in downtown Seattle. Do we have a plan in place if they get pushed out of downtown and they come to West Seattle? That's the first question. Second question is, and I just jotted this down, I was kind of alarmed when you said, what did Officer Morrell do? Because that immediately tells me that you don't support the officers, you automatically assume that an innocent victim rather than, so I didn't really appreciate that slant towards the police did something wrong rather than personal accountability or rather than finding out the whole story.
No, I appreciate that, but you know, I just definitely appreciate that. I just actually misunderstood, and you know, so I made a joke of it, and I apologize. But believe me, nobody wants to support the officers more than I do. I mean, I was a police officer. I'm a police officer first, and the police chief second. So, and I really want the officers to know that we all support them. And I think the team that I selected are people who are really going to go out there and work side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the police officers in the field and with the community. And they desperately need that. They need visible leadership who will really support them out there. So thank you for mentioning that. And I apologize if I made a joke that was offensive, but I was just, I think it's more my Boston accent than anything else. Yeah, I'm very, I'm very concerned about the homeless and coming up with a solution where we don't just push people around. We need to try to solve problems, not move problems. And there are a lot of people facing really serious challenges. And I know 2 or 3 weeks ago, a group of us went and the mayor had a retreat. We went into his office for an entire Saturday. And we sat around the table and we rolled up our sleeves and we came up with some solutions for intervention, and so it wasn't just all about enforcement. The police, we had a seat at the table, but the mayor has Deputy Mayor Kate Jonkas leading this effort to put together a comprehensive, sensible plan for dealing with homelessness and some of the other challenges we're facing, not just downtown, but in other areas of the city. So you're right, it has to be a thoughtful solution. We can't just go and move people on when these people need help. And we can't just move them from one place to another where it's going to affect quality of life issues for other people too. So complicated issues, when I first arrived out here, I said, wow, I know how to solve crime, but some of these other issues are very complicated. And I think because Seattle is a wonderful city and a generous city and a sympathetic city, and also all of our services are located pretty centrally downtown, people come in from all over this region and probably from other states to avail of the great services that we have here. So it's a great thing that we're a wonderful, compassionate, and sensitive and caring community, but we need to come up with creative solutions to some of the challenges that exist.
So we have another written question, and this kind of goes back to what Chief Wilkie talked about earlier, and you mentioned it in introducing him. Could you tell us a little more about your plans with the micro-community policing plans? Not only for the short term, but what your long-term goals are with those plans?
Yeah, maybe I could just talk a little bit about the vision for that. And by the way, I'm very interested in hearing your feedback on this too. I mean, I think this should be a collective effort. You know, I just thought, again, because I've been in the business for a long time, that we shouldn't dictate community policing strategies from headquarters, from the top down, that we should have police officers on the beat and people who are working in neighborhoods work in collaboration with community members to identify the priorities that they think are important. I mean, we're always going to respond to the Part 1 crimes. We're always going to deal with the robberies and the assaults and homicides and those crimes. But each neighborhood has unique issues. Some neighborhoods may be concerned about car prowls. Other neighborhoods may be concerned about graffiti. Other neighborhoods may be concerned about low-level drug dealing or things like that are happening on the corners. So we want people in those neighborhoods to have a say in what they want to prioritize, what they want us to prioritize as police. So I don't want to be too prescriptive about it, but I said to the captains, the precinct captains, first of all, go out and map out your neighborhoods. You tell me, which neighborhoods, because in each precinct, we have such a vast array of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood may face very different challenges. So let's talk to those people in a particular neighborhood and figure out what's most important to them, and then we'll focus on that. So that's kind of the gist of it. But we recently established a partnership with Seattle University, and we have their Department of Criminal Justice involved with us now. Because we said, well, we need some help really kind of structuring this and also developing metrics so we can measure how we're doing with these things. Because, as I said before, we can all look at the crime stats and that's fine, but that's not necessarily a reflection of how people feel in their neighborhoods. So let's really figure out how we measure how people are feeling and how we're doing on some of these less serious crimes and these disorder issues that are important to people. So, we have our first version of our community policing plans for West Seattle, and each neighborhood has pretty much said, these are the top 3 to 5 priorities that are important to us. But we need to go back and say, okay, do we need to put some more meat on the bones here? What are our collective strategies going to be for addressing these issues? And how are we going to measure our improvement? And as we resolve one issue, what other issues do we want to put on the list? So I think it's going to be fluid, it's going to be a work in progress, but thankfully we'll have I think the academics will help us bring structure to it so we can measure.
This is Jennifer, who is our intern at the Southwest Precinct.
So Jennifer, do you want to get up and say a few words? Well, we'll put you on the spot later, but we really appreciate your back.
So to carry on with that just a little bit further, could you talk a little bit about the community police team concept and what they actually, because it's been mentioned a couple of times tonight, but some folks might not know what our community police team officers actually do.
Right, well, I'll let Chief Wilkie talk a little bit about the CPTs, the community police team officers. But I think that's a work in progress too. I really want to take a look at that. I mean, somebody mentioned what did we call them? The people who used to, the CSOs. I mean, I think it'd be great to kind of revisit all of it and see where we stand now in terms of our community police resources and how this all, how we integrate all of it. Our personnel and our plans.
Chief? For anybody who hasn't met them, we used to have 2, we actually have 3, what we call community police team officers. One for Frank sector, one for William sector, and then one officer that kind of floats back and forth. Really the concept, and it gets consistent across all the precincts, but there are a lot of things that we do that a patrol officer just flat does not have the time to do in between calls. We have long-term projects, like some of the ones that we work on are problem residences in South Park. A patrol officer trying to have them work on finding the owner and trying to figure out what we can do for the problem residents, they just flat don't have the time in between calls. You have a small group of officers that are specially trained. They become experts in how to quickly close a problem residence, or how to deal with noise issues, or how to work on, like, one of the projects we had last year was Westwood Village. And the CPT officer developed a trespass program for Westwood Village, got a lot of people on it, got a lot of the kids that were causing a lot of problems with it, coordinated with the bike officers so the bike officers knew the people who were on trespass, did a lot of enforcement there, and we actually dropped, because of the CPT officer and the bike officers, we dropped crime there almost 40%. It gives them, the CPT officers have the experience and the training to be able to work on long-term projects versus a patrol officer who quite honestly is not going to have a lot of time during the day in between calls to devote the time and energy to a specific problem. So that's the idea. I'm a big supporter of the CPT officers. We have a phenomenal crew here, and they do a huge amount of work.
Okay, so that's all the questions and all the folks that had signed up. So number one, I want to thank the new chief for helping to organize this. I also want to thank Chief O'Toole for coming back and fulfilling her promise to the West Seattle community that she would come back and do that. I want to thank Deb and Karen with West Seattle Blackwatch Captains Network for helping organize tonight as well. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to come out and show your commitment to our West Seattle community. That's one of the things that I love about living here is just how committed neighbors are in West Seattle. And so if you'd like another opportunity to get involved and to find out more about how you can build community, I invite you to come back here on Saturday morning. Views, which is an organization, it's called Visualizing Increased Engagement in West Seattle. We'll be hosting a candidate forum for 10 of the 11 candidates that are declared for District 1 in our city council race. Starts at 9, will end at noon, so if I could come back. And once again, thank you everybody for coming out tonight.